Welcome back. This is the second part of this practice paper. And we're going to actually look at how you answer the question. Before you do that, let's remind ourselves how an examiner will mark you and how I'm going to mark you when I get your test papers in next week. If you're scoring level 3, band 3 or level 4, band 4, you're going to get a good mark. Okay? Think about P paragraphs. You make your point and then you evidence and explain your point, okay, and then link it, if you're clever, to the next paragraph. They'll score you in the middle of that band if you start to write as if you're within that band, and if you really evidence and explain using your own knowledge or using inferences from the source to explain your point, and you do it in a developed, sophisticated way, you're going to score highly in that band. If you do it in an underdeveloped way, you'll score lowly. So always put you in the midpoint and see if you can go up or down. That's a fair way of marking. The only way you're going to score high is by thinking about the structure of P paragraphs and really putting in developed explanation, analysis into your paragraph, and then you'll score highly. So I'm not going to waste any time, because I really want to look at how you deconstruct the question to know what it means and how you therefore answer the question. I think it's important to say that it's very easy to be scared of these big questions. Look, there's so many words, but break it down. You've already done this. Study sources A to F and use your own knowledge. You've annotated the sources, you've thought about each source, and you've got a picture in your mind as to how you'll use those sources, make inferences from those sources, deductions, and oops, come back, what are you doing? Okay, but if you don't use your own knowledge, guys, you know you're going to get penalised. You won't get very many marks at all. Okay, so your revision and drawn upon your contextual knowledge from the era we're looking at, women during the First World War, is critical. Look at this statement. Working conditions for women during the First World War were poor. That's the hypothesis you have to test and answer. Okay, see if you agree with it or not. Okay, some of you, last week we gave you a hypothesis to go away and work on. This is to prepare for this type of higher order thinking question. Then the question, so you're answering that. Okay, how far do the sources in this paper support this statement? How far? Significantly or not significantly? Do they really support that statement or not? Do some support it and others don't, etc. But you've got to use the sources to see if that's true or not. Use details from the sources and your own knowledge again to explain your answer. Really, it's saying to you, were working conditions good or poor, and do the sources and your own knowledge back this up? So try and scale down the question so as you can actually get it in your mind what it means, and then maybe write that question down somewhere up here so as you know what you're answering, and then keep coming back to that point. Okay, were working conditions really that poor for women? Do the sources and your own knowledge back this up? And keep that in your mind when you keep coming back to revisit the question. Remember though, you've got to pick the right text response or written style, written purpose to get good marks. How far question means make a judgment and write to persuade. That's your style of writing. Persuade me or persuade the examiner whether that's true or not. Okay? Make sure your writing is legible, readable, and also that you paragraph and structure your work and proofread your spellings. And please draw upon your specialist vocabulary knowledge. You'll score higher. If we're going to look at the mark scheme now, let's zoom in and look at the mark scheme. Okay, this is an example of a level 3, 9 to 12 marks out of 16. If you notice, they're combining sources. You don't just write about one source and then the next source in a chronological order, A, B, C, D. It's quite a babyish way of writing. You've got to combine the sources, see which ones agree, which one don't, with the hypothesis. See which ones disagree with each other, and then argue a thread all the way through your answer. So if you were to look at this, look. Source A, D and F suggests that working conditions were poor for some women during the First World War. Some women. Source A suggests that they were not well paid compared to men and were not well protected against the chemicals they worked with. This is reliable, so you're testing the reliability and you're looking at the nature, origin, purpose of the source. Because it is written by a munitions worker, although it may not be typical of all factories, so you're putting a limited judgment on it. Really important you do that to gain marks, to show that you're building in an analysis of that source using your own knowledge to make a judgment on that hypothesis. Source D also suggests that the conditions were very unpleasant. These women worked too many hours, were poorly rewarded for overtime and suffered illness because of working with varnish. However, this is less reliable because it was written by a supporter of women's rights who may have selected the worst example in order to encourage change and promote the role of women during the war. Clever paragraph. Okay, actually this writer has used the historical terms really accurately and is organising the material and given a really concise answer. Remember those key sentence starters, and I'll give you a loose plan to go with this to prepare over the weekend. Furthermore, however, on the other hand, it could be added that so as you're developing this thread from the other sources and combining sources to argue against one another backed up by your own knowledge, I'd like to see a bit more of that writer's own knowledge added into that question for a higher grade. But if you notice, you don't have to write a lot. You've got 4 pages you have to that you could write on. 2 pages can get you an A star if you write with quality and not quantity, so you really pinpoint what you're trying to say. Keep going back to this question. Okay. Working conditions for women during the First World War were poor. Every paragraph, check it links back to that. Are you answering that question using the sources and your own knowledge? And if you are, you're going to score well. Okay. So going back to here, look. Let's zoom in a bit more. Can I do that? Okay. This level 4 answer, worth between 13 and 16 marks, is giving more of a balanced answer. However, sources B and C strongly suggest that the conditions of women were, in some cases, good. Source B shows a well-dressed munitions worker. However, this is not typical and does not provide reliable proof because it's propaganda designed to encourage the recruitment of munition workers. Cleverly looking at the purpose of the source, okay, and its content. Source C also strongly refutes the hypothesis by suggesting that women were well rewarded for their work and could afford a very good social life. Look at that key word there, refutes. Hypothesis. Technically great words that are going to score you a high mark. Suggesting that women were all rewarded for their work and could afford a very good social life and various luxuries. This is reliable evidence for an actual worker, though it may not be typical of all munition workers. Putting a limited judgment on it, look. Not everyone may have been in that situation, okay, but does it show you that the conditions were good, okay, and that their pay was good or poor? And you're arguing all the way through. The sources that do and the sources that don't support that hypothesis, backed up by your own knowledge, okay? Let's go back one more time to the question. Here it is, look. Okay. How far do the sources in this paper support this statement, okay? Not do you think this statement is true, but how far do the sources in this paper support this statement, okay? And use your own knowledge to back up the sources if you think they're accurate or not, okay? Working conditions for women during the First World War. Good luck.